The first song is number 19, Over My Head. And we have the inestimable pleasure of hearing from the one and only Jamarah Hayner. Over my head, I see trouble in the air. Over my head, I see trouble in the air. Over my head, I see trouble in the air. There must be a God somewhere. Over my head, I hear music in the air. Over my head, I hear music in the air. Over my head, I hear music in the air. There must be a God somewhere. Over my head, I hear singing in the air. Over my head, I hear singing in the air. Over my head, I hear singing in the air. There must be a God somewhere. Over my head, I see glory in the air. Over my head, I see glory in the air. Over my head, I see glory in the air. There must be a God somewhere. Over my head, I see trouble in the air. Over my head, I see trouble in the air. Over my head, I see trouble in the air. There must be a God somewhere.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Taos United Community Church. We welcome you all, no matter what you believe, what you used to believe, what you'd love to believe someday. You are welcome here. This house of prayer belongs to you, and we're so glad you're here. So, Sid has an announcement, and if anybody else does, get ready. 1 second. You'll be next.
Morning, everybody. Hi. I just wanted to read the latest thank you note from a medical debt relief recipient. It is with heartfelt gratitude that we write to say thank you for your incredible generosity in paying the medical bill of our late beloved wife and mother. Your kindness and support during this difficult time for our family has meant the world to all of us and has greatly relieved a burden that has only been adding to the sadness of our loss. We are truly humbled by the selflessness and compassion from each of you, and we cannot thank you enough. We will forever be grateful for your generosity. Thank you.
Thank you, Sid, for reminding us that these are real people that we're helping, and it's a good thing. Anybody else have an announcement? Oh, yes, Chris. Sorry. My memory is just awful. Go on. We can hear you.
I just want to thank you all for bringing all that plastic. It was filled to the top and so clean. And Sid and I brought it to Las Cordovas yesterday. So keep up the good work.
Any other announcements?
Yes, there's one from the TV screen. Hey, it's really nice to see everybody. Looks like it's getting chillier up there. It's a little cool down here, but nothing like what you guys are feeling. I just wanted to tell people that I'm going to put a URL, online address in the chat for Cool Tunes for a Hot Planet. It's the podcast I've been working on with 6 or 7 other teammates from thirdact.org/creatives. And but it is the first debut appearance of me as host. So I had a little fun with it. And the theme of the podcast that is dropping tomorrow, actually, on the yes, on the 10th, is water. And we like to address different themes that are climate related. Now that we're past voting and inauguration and all that, we're back to a climate focus. So I hope you'll take a look, have a listen. It's a video podcast, also called a vodcast. So look in the chat.
Thank you, Pearlie. Good luck with all of that. And thank you for sharing it with us. It's good. Anybody else? Scott, yes.
Well, as you all remember, last December, we jammed all of the 5 for 5 giving initiatives into like a short 3 or 4 week period. We're going to try to be a little more proactive this year. So we'll try to hit like 1 a quarter. And the first one is 1 great hour sharing. And it's typically taken during the season of Lent. So there will be more announcement about this as we go forward, and which particular Sunday we'll pick to kind of target that anyway. So just want to let you know that it's coming.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you very much. All right, let's take a quiet moment and get centered and comfortable seat. And let's breathe. Take a deep breath in, deep breath out. Breathing in all the goodness that surrounds us. Breathing out all the distractions. Our opening prayer today is from Macrina Whitaker, and it's called A Prayer After a Night of Discouragement. God of compassion, restorer of the dawn, we know, of course, you and I, that morning will, after this prolonged night, return. I've waited before and never been disappointed. Weary, but not disappointed. Brand your hope into the center of my heart, just as you once carved me on the palm of your hand, so that if anyone should question me about my hope in darkness, I'll be ever ready to explain it. And now we have time to light candles and bring our prayers to be made visible on this altar. And while we do that, Michael is going to play this little light of mine that we can sing, so we don't let our lights get snuffed out. Please come.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. There's This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. All through the night, I'm gonna let it shine. All through the night, I'm gonna let it shine. All through the night, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. All through the night, I'm gonna let it shine. All through the night, I'm gonna let it shine. All through the night, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
Hi, this reading is from Paul's letter to the Ephesians. Paul's in jail when he writes this thing. Anyhow, this is chapter 4, verses 25 to 32. Therefore, each of you must put off falsehood and speak truthfully to your neighbor, for we are all members of one body. In your anger, do not sin. Do not let the sun go down while you are still angry, and do not give the devil a foothold. Anyone who has been stealing must steal no longer, but must work, doing something useful with their own hands, that they may have something to share with those in need. Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouth, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. And do not grieve the Holy Spirit of God, with whom you were sealed for the day of redemption. Get rid of all bitterness, rage, and anger, brawling and slander, along with every form of malice. Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as Christ, God, forgave you.
This is reading 2. These are excerpts from a progressive email making the rounds. I will not work together to build a wall. I will not work together to persecute Muslims. I will not work together to shut out refugees from other countries. I will not work together to weaken and demolish environmental protection. I will not work together to remove civil rights from anyone. I will not work together to alienate countries that have been our allies for as long as I have been alive. I will not work together to slash funding for education. I will not work together to take basic assistance from people who are at the bottom of this socioeconomic ladder. I will not work together to get rid of common sense regulations on guns. I will not work together to eliminate the minimum wage. I will not work together to violate the Geneva Convention. I will not work together to give the Ku Klux Klan, the Nazi Party, and white supremacists a seat at the table or to normalize their hatred. I will not work together to deny health care to people who need it. I will not work together to deny medical coverage to people on the basis of a pre-existing condition. I will not work together to increase voter suppression. I will not work together to normalize tyranny. I will not work together to eliminate or reduce ethical oversight at any level of government. I will not work together with anyone who is or admires tyrants and dictators. I will not support anyone that thinks it's okay to put a pipeline to transport oil on sacred ground for Native Americans. It would run under the Missouri River, which provides drinking water for millions of people. An accident waiting to happen. I will not work together to legitimize racism, sexism, and authoritarianism. This is my line, and I am drawing it. I will stand for honesty, love, respect for all living beings, and for the beating heart that is in the center of life itself. I will use my voice and my hands to reach out to the uninformed and to anyone who will listen. That winning will being great again, rich, or even beautiful is nothing when others are sacrificed to glorify its existence. This was an excerpt from a progressive email making the rounds this week.
Janet, we can all go home now. Janet gave the whole sermon. That's all done. I was going to try and get through this without crying. It's not going to happen. The second I saw Janet was the reader. I love that she read the angry part. Good morning. I miss you guys and I love you guys. I want to thank, I don't think she's here today, but I don't know if Leonore's there. A couple of weeks ago, Leonore sent me a note saying, "You seem upset. Are you okay?" And I have sat with that for 2 weeks. And no, I'm not. I'm heartbroken. I'm angry every day. Not a day at work has gone by where I haven't had to turn off the video and just sit and process that and cry, be angry, whatever it is. So I'm really wrestling with that as just as a person, as a spiritual person, as everything else. How am I going to do this for 4 more years? It's exhausting. And I imagine that a lot of us are doing that same daily struggle. it's the exhaustion of America in general, having had to do this for 4 years already and having to do it for a much worse 4 years. And it's only been 2 weeks. And it's exhausting and we're all falling apart. So I wanted to take this time to kind of process a couple different ways that I'm going about that. I would love to hear from you guys in the next week or the next 4 years, how you're approaching this as well. What's working for you? What's not working for you? How you're um, finding outlets. How you're not letting this cannibalize your spirit as we try to keep doing the work. So I'm so grateful for this church where we have a place that we can workshop these feelings. Because you guys are all pros at this. You guys have been doing this for a very, very long time, and I'm so grateful for that. So here's where my head is today. I have not only been angry and frustrated, I've also been really scared about those feelings within myself. I'm feeling more anger than I'm comfortable feeling. And I'm comfortable feeling anger. Anger is what keeps us moving. But I'm also feeling uncomfortable with the level of it. I am feeling moments where my inclination towards compassion seems to be non-existent. And that is interesting. It brings up a couple of different things for me. It brings up the question I keep going back to is, do I recognize myself? Do I like this version of myself? Can I live with this version of myself? And if not, what do I need to do? But step one in that is just recognizing what is this version of myself. After the election, I don't know, a few weeks, days, into November, there was a singer, songwriter who wrote something that was also sort of floating around. I feel like half of our literature is just floating around out there these days on email or social media or past notes and whatever. And I'm so grateful for that. It is great organizing. I love it. I hope we use it to the best that we can. But this writer, her name is Ethel Kane. She's a young woman out of Florida, and she wrote something that is beautiful and that scares me to death because it's exactly what I felt and feel often. And I'm going to read it to you guys. And I'm reading this not for her, but for me as a confession of a part of myself that scares me. Here is the beautiful thing that she wrote. I must say, if you voted for him, I hope that peace never finds you. Instead, I hope clarity strikes you someday like a clap of lightning, and you have to live the rest of your life with the knowledge and guilt of what you've done and who you are as a person. That is beautiful, and she's not wrong. And saying that out loud really scares me about myself because I have to hold two things to be true. I have to hold the truth of that statement, of me standing behind that statement, and then me being in a place where I feel the words, I hope that peace never finds you. As a Christian, I'm a place where I'm saying, I hope that peace never finds a significant part of my fellow citizenry, and that scares me, and I don't actually know what to do with that. And I'm not going to find any answers on that in the next 15 minutes here. But that's a confession. And it's interesting because I did not grow up with a faith tradition of formal confession, but I have found it to be useful. Personally, I found it to be useful in 12-step programs to say, here is what I did. Here is just what I did, and here's how I have felt, so that we can move forward. And so that's just my starting place of I have an anger that scares me. And so what do I do next? I get to say, is that anger justified? And Janet reminded me this morning just now that is justified. The feelings and the values behind the anger absolutely are justified. What we are watching right now is unconscionable, and it is unacceptable, and it is also happening. The loss on a daily and hourly basis and especially the losses that we aren't seeing, the things that are happening in the shadows, in the farms, in the factories, at the border, that are happening currently, are atrocious. They are absolute atrocities. What first broke me is my sister lives up in Redding, California, which is this little red county in a blue state. And the day after the election, she has 2 kids, and her son's 9. So I guess he's in 4th grade. And the day after the election, one of these school district administrators took it upon themselves to send an email to every parent in the school district saying, we need, for no reason at all, an updated copy of your child's birth certificate. Please send it in by the end of the week. Which is disgusting. There's absolutely no reason school districts need every birth certificates in the middle of November. There's no sort of administrative archiving project that's going on then. That is purely to cause fear. And it did. And kids are already starting to leave the classrooms and the soccer teams and just being 9 years old because their families have to run. And that's before he even took office. It is just sick. And I don't have to list off everything that's going because all of you are thinking about it all the time too. But the harm is real and our disgust with it is real, and that's a good thing. And I hope we never, ever lose it. I hope that Janet's reading is always true for all of us. And that's why I come to this church, is that I know that that's true for all of you. I hope it always stays true for me. And we have a community of strength here where if we start to feel that we have to waver, we have to moderate, we have to make ourselves smaller, either to get along or to just stay sane, we have a community here that says, you don't have to do that. You don't ever have to do that. Please don't erase yourself. Do not erase your heart as a solution for the next 4 years. That's one thing we don't have to do. So we get to be grounded in that here. And we have a faith tradition. We have a whole book where we also get to be angry when we're supposed to. Jesus is angry a lot of the time. He doesn't have that many pages in the gospel, and he spends a lot of them being frustrated, and that's not a bad thing. It's not our place to be flipping over tables in the temple, but we can do our version of that, and we have to. So I'm really grateful that that I have that lineage spiritually, that's something that we are allowed to do, that we are allowed to take pride in doing and dedicate ourselves to doing. And I'm grateful then that we get to also pause to say, how do I do this in a way that's healthy for me? So I did that first sort of affirmation of, is there anything that I'm feeling that's wrong here? No, totally okay with it. But this anger could eat me alive. So what do I do? And I was stuck there. And then I witnessed an absolute miracle over the past couple of months. And I'm going to pause and tell you guys a story, and I promise it comes back around. A lot of you guys know all of the work I do is in politics, and a lot of it's around police reform, criminal justice reform, and specifically relevant to this, wrongful convictions and exonerations. And there are some of the best people you will ever meet are doing exoneration work. They're really the best. And it's some of the hardest work out there. And I love it when I get to even just touch that work a tiny bit. So one night, like 9 months ago, I get a frantic call from an attorney who's just one of the coolest attorneys in the state of California doing this stuff. She's retired, but she still helps out where she can. And she calls me and she says, Jamarah, I would never ask for a favor like this, but this is an emergency. I need to tell you about this case. And she told me about this case, and the reason it was an extra emergency is that she was literally driving into one of the women's prisons out here in California. And the case was two people who were young at the time, who were wrongfully convicted of a homicide that they had nothing to do with, weren't there, didn't know the people involved, and were inside state prison for 17 years. One was a young woman, Charlotte, who was 2 months pregnant at the time. Another one was a young boy, Lombardo, who was 15 years old at the time, both of whom were illegally coerced by LAPD into confessing, though Charlotte never confessed. And they were inside for 17 years. And this became, over the past several years, a cause within the innocence attorneys here in California to say this is one of the worst we've ever seen. We've seen a lot of bad ones, and this is one of the worst. Their confessions are on videotape. Here are all the reasons they had nothing to do with this. And in fact, a large part of the reason that they got out a month and a half ago is the people who actually did it wrote affidavits saying, yeah, it wasn't them. I know it wasn't them, it was me, which is just, absurd. So I was able to jump in, and the story has nothing to do with me whatsoever. It was just very cool to be involved with it. But through a lot of hard work from a lot of people, through this absolute emergency, Charlotte and Lombardo got out just before Christmas. And 2 weeks ago, I got to go to a welcome home party for Charlotte with a small group of women who've been in a similar situation, or attorneys and advocates who help them during and after. An exoneration is a wonderful thing, and 17 years inside wrongfully will absolutely destroy you. So most people that come out have a really long journey, especially when you go on when you're 15 years old. And so I met Charlotte, show up, and there's cake and there's flowers. And I have to tell you guys, Charlotte is one of the most well-adjusted human beings I've ever met on this planet, which probably means I've been working in politics for too long. But what it actually means is that I was astounded and curious, like, how did, she's going to have a journey, she's going to have all of this. And I just asked her, all of us did, how are you this together more than any of us after 17 years? What did you do? We were genuinely asking, and we're all asking, like, as our country's fallen apart and all of this. And she tells me this amazing thing that she did. And it was so obvious and so amazing. She said, I learned really fast that I had to practice acceptance. So her mind had to do two things for 17 years. One, her mind had to know, I am stuck in here. I didn't do it. I had nothing to do with it. I genuinely do not know what they're talking about. I hope that I get out. I am working with my attorneys to get out. I hope that happened one day. And then another part of her brain had to say, but until and unless that happens, I'm in here for a life sentence. So what do I do? Because every single day, the activation to her body, to her spirit, to how she moves through 24 hours of, I have to get out of here. There's something's wrong. I have to get out of here, would have killed her. And a lot of people don't survive that. They don't even survive long enough to get out. So this miracle happened where her brain, God, whatever, allowed her to do that. For 17 years, she practiced the most radical acceptance I've ever heard of. And no one has a pleasant experience being wrongfully incarcerated for that long, even for one day. But she practiced acceptance, and she had a community in there that lasts to outside. She took every single class, every single thing that one can do. She did. And she centered herself in peace and in growth and in whatever serenity she could find while she was in there. And she had to do it. She mentally had to do it to accept this unacceptable thing without saying, she didn't accept it in the sense of falsely admitting to something that she didn't do. She never confessed, never would. So she held her truth, but was able to get creative in what acceptance meant to her. And it was beautiful. And that woman, she's 37 now. And she's going to be fine. She has a long way to go, but she's going to be fine. And to watch that, I mean, for people that have, all of us have seen miracles on a personal level where you see someone where maybe a year ago or 10 years ago, they were just, falling apart, crawling on the floor, whatever they were struggling with. And then to see them come through that is amazing. So I go to this welcome party and see this amazing thing, and it's surrounded by these community of women and watching what Charlotte chose to do. And after a couple days, I realized, oh, I can learn from this. I can steal shamelessly from her approach to acceptance. And so I have. So I've really, really been meditating on praying on what does that mean? What did she do? Our situation on a personal level is nowhere near as bad as hers. So we can probably try and figure it out of getting through 4 years of finding some version of acceptance that works for us and that has us at the end of this come out as different versions of ourselves. My prayer as we went into the pandemic was, God, please let this change me in whatever ways this adventure is going to take me on. And it was amazing. And parts of it were so hard, but having for at least me, that experience of my heart centered in, please let this change me in some kind of way, whatever that means, was great. And so I've been thinking about how I can apply that to now and how this next 4 years through acceptance can change us into something, how we can be productive during this time. When productive does not mean working together for a second for any of the things that some people who have illegally taken control of various systems of government are trying to do. We'll stop that, but what can we do? And as always, Paul's letters are useful. He's helpful. He says, what are you doing that's productive during this time? Don't let the sun go down on your anger, which doesn't necessarily mean erase the cause for the thing that you're upset about. It means do something useful. It means get through it a little bit if you can. Do something useful so that you have something to share with somebody in need. And I love that because that reminded me, and I hope it reminds you guys too, of all of the useful and productive and beautiful things that have come out of times of protest for us in the past as a movement, as people. Some of the best people that I've ever met, some of the best books I've ever read, some of my favorite songs, some of my favorite parts of myself exist from what I encountered marching and being angry and studying and crying and learning. And I love that. I love that work brings you into contact with people that you hadn't known before. It forces you out of yourself because you're organizing together and we're scheming together and we're holding the line together. And that is so beautiful. One of the most beautiful parts is getting to do that in multi-generational spaces. I don't know if you guys know how lucky I feel all the time to get to be around you and the experiences and the wisdom and the laughter that you have. Thank you so much for those of you who just do that by showing up and talking. To someone who's like a little baby only over here at 40. Thanks to you who do that, with Third Way and other groups in a more formal sense. But you get to learn. That's so cool. So one of the ways that God gets to change, I hope, me during this is so many different perspectives from so many different people. I get to see how Indigenous and First Nations people are bringing their spirit to their protest. I get to see that, right? I get to see what that looks like for 19-year-old kids. And I don't even understand half of what they're talking about, but I get to learn from it. And it is so cool. I get to discover new books. I get to learn from all of these things. And it's wonderful. Like the protest art alone that we're going to get for the next 4 years is going to be just epic. And it doesn't mean that any of this is worth it. It's still awful. But we also know how to show up in creative ways. and we get to learn how to contribute to that. And some of that gets to be on topic of the things we're going to learn and do through whatever protest looks like for you, and it doesn't need to look like being out there at another march or anything else. But we also get to do that in ways that are entirely unrelated from anything really that's going on. We get to protect our spaces. We get to work in our gardens. We get to plant something or protect something or restore something that will be more vibrant and stronger 4 years from now. If nothing else, because we got out of bed to go get our hands covered in dirt and do that work. So what I'm learning for me right now, again, I have absolutely no answers, is that step one for me is acceptance. No, that's step two. Step one is affirming our values. That what we are feeling and what we believe is right. And that's not something we should walk away from. Step two is accepting that we are in a place where we are going to have to live with some unacceptable things for a while. And it's going to be awful, and there will be harm. And that's just a reality. And that will break our hearts every day for the next 4 years. And that we can keep going through that as we are able to. And that doesn't mean that everything's going to be exciting and beautiful and rosy all the time. We're still going to feel that weight constantly and feel that exhaustion. But that it's okay to figure out what is the healthiest and most productive version of walking through that. And whether productive means and healing just means spending time with a grandchild, or protecting and restoring an acequia, or whatever that means, or starting a video podcast. I already forgot your cool word for it. I'm not that hip. Whatever that means are all things that we get to do in between the times that we are also curled up in bed and sick to our stomachs after watching Rachel Maddow, and I'm so glad she's back. So those are all things that we get to do, but also that we have this space, we have this faith tradition that allows us to wrestle with that, to say, I am scared, I am worried about a potential version of myself that wishes that other people will never find peace. And I hope they never find peace. I can say all those things and have that be true, and I don't have to sort that out, because guess what? Judging that is not my job. It is actually not my power to grant someone peace or not. That's not my work order. So that's fine. And that we are flexible enough together to hold all of this. So it's a messy 4 years ahead of us. I am going to be angry and heartsick all the time. I'm going to be the worst versions of myself, wishing the absolute worst things for people. And we're going to be the absolute best versions of ourselves, because that's what we have been every single other time. That's how we got together and gravitated together as this church. This church probably doesn't exist without all of us having gone through our experiences of protest and struggle and fighting for justice. That's how we found each other. So we can be with that here together. So thank you guys for your anger that is not wrong. Thank you for the care with which we hold each other, where we send a note saying, hey, today seemed really hard. How are you doing? I'm not doing well. How are you doing? Or did you just see that thing? I'm going crazy. So I love that. Thank you for being a place that is safe for confession and safe for brainstorming and for organizing and for strategizing. Thank you for understanding that anger is necessary and is also vicious and will tear us apart. And so what do we do? So I don't know. But if you guys do know, please email me or call me, because I want to figure it out. But thank you guys for letting me just ramble today. I love you all to death. And Janet, thank you for reading that really angry reading. I love that you did it. You did it so well. And thanks for letting me tack on this extra sermon to Janet's sermon. Love you guys.
Thank you, Jamarah. You're so wonderful. We're so lucky to have you. Great. So now we have 2 minutes of silence to take all of that in, and Michael will bring us out with music.